Let's go ahead and get rolling here. Welcome everyone to, I guess, what I've been told is episode number 63 of the Tuesday night Zoomcast on Tuesday here, December 6, 2022. For those who may not be aware, my name is Matt Leaf, and I'll be one of the hosts and one of the panelists tonight for tonight's session, which is based on basically it's a rules session. So it's your opportunity to ask any questions as it relates to playing rules, USA Hockey playing rules, and myself and our other guest tonight, Dave LaBuda, our national referee in chief, will do everything within our power to either A, answer that question for you, have a very valid discussion in regards to what may or may not be the best answer to that question. And if we don't come to a solution tonight, we will find a way to make sure that we get back to you with a correct answer once we've been able to enlist some other experts in regards to coming up to a solution. So again, thank you for joining us tonight. Hopefully everyone had a very happy Thanksgiving holiday and moving into Christmas here. And we look forward to spending the next 58 minutes or so with you again tonight. As a friendly reminder from an etiquette standpoint, if you do have a question, and we hope that you do have some questions tonight, please feel free to use the Q&A function. We will be tracking that on a regular basis throughout the night, and we will get to as many questions as we possibly can. And for any questions that we may not be able to get to tonight, we will make sure that we personally respond to you at some point here in the next day or two. So we do want to make sure that that we get everyone taken care of tonight. As we normally do, we're going to start out with a poll. And get a little feedback from our audience tonight. So let me go ahead and launch that. I believe there are 5 questions to tonight's poll. Go ahead, take your time and leisurely answer all 5 questions. When you're done, you can press submit, and we'll go ahead and take a quick look at the results before we get into the formal portion of tonight's session. So let's take a couple minutes to go ahead and do the poll questions, please. Okay, thank you for taking the time to go through that. Again, the feedback is generally well received by the national office, and we share it with a couple of the other departments so we can get a feel for what our audience may be thinking or some of the things that they're experiencing. So real quickly, let's go through. Just share the results of the poll. Question number 1. Now that we're into season 2, how would you characterize the rule changes that went into effect prior to the 21-22 season? Looks like the majority, about 2/3 roughly, have indicated the majority of teams have figured it out, and the rules have little impact on the game. And then kind of sort of split between, there's still a number of teams that have not quite figured it out. Teams are fully adjusted, and one individual out there that seems to believe that the teams have not adjusted at all, and it has a vast majority of the impact or negative impact on the games that are being played. So if that individual wants, it's totally up to you, but if you want to share a little bit more information on that in the Q&A, we can certainly take a look at that a little bit later on in terms of whether that might be a localized local area issue, or whether there's teams coming over from throughout the country that are coming into your area that just don't seem to have quite figured it out yet. Question number 2. Overall, how would you characterize the consistency of officials in applying the rules? And assuming that this is mostly an officiating group, I think we're probably trying to be pretty realistic there. Again, the 60% mostly consistent, but there's still a few games where consistency is an issue. Roughly 27%, the officials have been mostly consistent, and 14% where consistency is still one of the biggest issues that we have. And again, anyone who wishes to elaborate a little bit, whether that is on, whether it's a body checking enforcement issue or aggressive infractions, whatever that may be, feel free to use the Q&A section to elaborate a little bit. Question number 3, your opinion, the most difficult rules to apply. All over the map here, and pretty much spread out amongst the four big ones and one other out there, but the abuse of officials, competitive contact in the non-checking or the competitive contact categories, the big four, and then obviously the roughing, the body checking, still seems to be some issues in regards to the understanding there. Question number 4, how would you characterize the success of the zero tolerance policy? 45% say it has positively changed behavior. 50% has indicated that it has not changed behavior at all. And one indicated that all the above are basically true. Is that in some cases it has, some cases it has not impacted, and in some cases we do have some officials that are maybe hiding behind the zero tolerance policy as a means not to necessarily do their job. And finally, question number 5. Looks like we're going to be split here. Have you been involved in a player, coach, official, spectator during a game this season where the behavior of a coach or a spectator negatively impacted a game? And we're right at 50% yes, 50% no. I know that Dave is a member of the officiating hockey culture task force, who will probably be meeting again on Thursday. Will be more than ready to share that particular data with the task force the next time you meet. Any comments, any suggestions, or anything that sticks out from you, Dave, on any of the poll questions?
Well, particularly the answer to the last one. You're right. I think the task force is going to be very interested in that response. I would not have expected it to be perfectly split between 50-50, which tells me that the task force's mandate is as important today as it was almost a year ago when it was put together and given its assignment. So you know, we've been working hard on a weekly basis, and we'll be coming out with a first report at our winter meeting coming up in January.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen again real quick and get into a brief presentation and how we get started with a few things here. And then we'll ultimately get into some of your questions. So I'm going to start out with a fairly easy one here, and this one's for you, Dave. I guess really just as a real quick summary again, why is rule knowledge such an important part of the success of any official, and what exactly is USA Hockey trying to accomplish with our playing rules?
Well, you know, all officials, I'm sure, understand that our primary responsibility is to manage, quote, manage the game in a fair and safe manner. And the rules are certainly designed not only from keeping in mind fairness, but also the safety of all the participants. And so for officials to do their job or carry out their responsibility, they need to be familiar, very familiar with the rule book, not just the words, but also the spirit and intent of those rules. And you know, that's something that comes with game experience and time. You know, the important thing is that officials go out there and do the best job they can and prepare themselves the best that they can with going through the rule book, going through the case book, so that they do have you know, a good foundation of exactly, you know, where the boundary lines are with acceptable and unacceptable behavior.
And I think it's important, again, to understand exactly and remind everyone what is that role of the official. It's to enforce the rules of the game to the best of their ability. So the official does have that responsibility to not only have that rule knowledge, but it is a critical part of what they're doing. And I just want to emphasize again, it is perfectly okay for everyone that's on this call and or any of our 27,000 officials that are out there throughout the country to not agree with a rule. That's perfectly fine. It's America. We have freedom of choice and freedom of certain freedoms in terms of how we may view a certain thing or our perception in terms of what's right or what's wrong as it relates to these types of things. However, with that being said, as long as you're going to wear that USA Hockey crest and you're going to put that on your sweater, it is not okay to choose not to enforce a rule simply because you don't agree with it. I think it's important to recognize that is that as a USA Hockey registered official, we are serving the game. And whether we 100% agree with everything that's going on in the game or not, the fact of the matter is that someone and someone who is likely more experienced or has some other knowledge that you may or may not be aware of, through a collective group of individuals and a board of directors has made a decision in terms of what they feel is in the best interest for youth hockey in the U.S. And that's why they've formulated the rules that they have. So you have an obligation, or we have an obligation as officials to respect that and to make sure that we're going out and doing our job in terms of enforcing those rules to the best of our ability.
Before you move on, Matt, if I can just add to what you just said, not only is it not only do you not have the option to not enforce rules, but you also don't have an option to enforce a rule the way you think as an official it should be enforced. We have gone through to great lengths and continue to try and give all of our officials a consistent idea of how we want the rules applied. And as I said, there's a little bit of a nuance here, but I've also seen officials who don't agree with the rule, but then they try to get around it by applying it the way they think it should be, and it's not consistent to the way USA Hockey would like it, the way we would like it applied. So I just wanted to add that to your explanation, which was very, very good.
No, that's an excellent point, Dave, and it's a good transition right into the next point that I want to make here is that not only just understanding the rule or knowing the rule isn't enough. We have to be able to understand what the spirit and the intent of that rule is. And we need that in order to be able to do a proper application of those rules. Just as an example, when the Declaration of Player Safety came out and the language that came out about banging the boards on the bench. Okay. And a lot of people immediately overreacted and they took that as a literal, oh my goodness, a player can't bang their stick against the boards when a goalie makes a good save again. And that was never, ever the spirit and the intent of the rule, nor was that ever indicated as being the spirit and the intent of that rule with any material that USA Hockey sent out. The spirit and the intent of that rule is to discourage teams and discourage players from escalating violent or dangerous situations when an illegal body check occurs, okay, that puts an opponent in jeopardy or puts an opponent in a vulnerable position and recklessly endangers them, is to escalate that situation by celebrating that as being a good hockey play. That was the spirit and the intent. That still is the spirit and the intent. But that's just one example of why it is so important that even with some of the questions that we have on the exam, a lot of people say, well, they're not straightforward, they're not clear or whatever. But a lot of that is the purpose of that is to get that official to open a rule book and to understand what the spirit and the intent is. And that's why the case book exists. That's why there's situations that exist there. That's why there's additional videos and educational material, is to help that member of our organization, not only the officials, but also the coaches, the players, the parents, to understand what the spirit and the intent of the rules is, so they could go into the proper application and have that game played within the framework in terms of what was intended with those rules in the first place. And again, I think one of the questions I just want to throw past you, Dave, that came out of our poll questions a little bit is, a common complaint that we do have, and especially from coaches, that officials are not consistent. They simply want the officials to be consistent. That's what they're looking for. But I think we want to dig down on that a little bit. Is I think we have to be aware that yes, there are some situations where officials do not have the experience and or the skill set to be consistent within themselves, let alone consistent with a variety of different partners that they may work with. But how much of this may also be an easy cop-out as a result of the coach maybe not knowing the rules themselves and or being emotionally attached to the outcome versus the officials actually being inconsistent in their application of certain rules. I've seen a lot of hockey games throughout the course of the season. There's certainly a lot of things that we can do differently and some things that we can do a little bit better. But I will say I've noticed in the last 5 years, the game has changed. The way the game is played, the physical aspect of the game has changed. The game is better. It's more finesse. It's more puck possession focused. It's more skill focused. I'm just curious to get your thoughts in regards to the consistency angle and is that maybe a little bit of a cop out?
Matt, I start out by saying I have the utmost respect for coaches because they certainly have a tough job, just as we have a tough job. But sometimes when coaches are on the bench, they only have a single sight line and they only have one perspective. And yet, and those things that you mentioned, the bias to want to win or to get the edge and so on, certainly goes into their evaluation of is an official consistently applying the rules. But as you said, consistency is not an easy thing to acquire because consistency is comprised of game experience and knowledge of the rule book, like you said, spirit and intent. One of the things, and I don't want to go off on a tangent on spirit and intent, but one of the things that disappoint me when I'm involved in a seminar of some kind is there aren't more questions that ask, well, why is this rule written the way it is? Because that gets to the spirit and intent and how an official applies that rule to any given situation in a hockey game. Keep in mind, an official, when they're out managing a hockey game, they have to visually see a situation for a brief moment, analyze it, compare it to their rule book knowledge and their game experience, and make a decision again within fractions of a second as to whether or not that falls within the boundaries of acceptable or unacceptable behavior. So, I mean, the challenge for officials is to obviously, again, know that rule book, know the spirit and intent of the rules thoroughly, so that analysis of the variables that go into any number of on-ice situations that happen in a game, to be able to analyze that and say, yes, that's an acceptable action, or no, that's not an acceptable action, and I have to assess a penalty there. Again, the officials, whether coaches agree with it, whether players agree with it, they only have one perspective of the game, and sometimes that, as you mentioned, that is prejudiced by their bias to wanted their team to win. Officials have, through their positioning and through our procedures, have a responsibility to make sure that they always put themselves in the best position with the best sight lines and the best field of vision, so that they can see those plays, make the visual analysis, and then decide whether or not they need to assess a penalty or not. So, you know what? I think coaches, for the most part, try and be honest in their evaluations of officials in certain situations, but there's no question that sometimes the emotional part of the game overcomes their more realistic and rational sense of, well, did this really happen, or are we just trying to get an advantage in this situation?
Yeah, no, great stuff. And I know one of the questions I get often asked is how can officials help themselves in regards to becoming more consistent in their rule application? And I think there's a couple of pretty simple answers there. Is number one, there's no substitute for the knowledge of the rules, and we've covered that, and understanding what the spirit and the intent of those rules are. But I think the other thing is to simplify things a little bit. Back 20, 30 years ago, we had a complicated system of gray area and black and white, and this was a gray area infraction, depending upon when it occurred, what the score was, what teams were involved, and all these other types of things. And I think we've really tried to get away from that. And if we simplify the process and understand that if the action is a violation of the rules and it meets one of the 4 basic penalty criteria, which is injury potential, loss of a scoring opportunity, change of possession, or blatantly obvious, if it fits one of those 4 criteria, it's a penalty. And if it doesn't fit one of those 4 criteria, it's not a penalty. And I think if we just simplify that process, it makes it a whole lot easier for us as officials to be consistent within ourselves. And then once we're consistent within ourselves, we can start working towards being consistent with our partners and putting a better product out on the ice.
That's a great point, Matt. And I think if I were to hope that the people watching this, the one thing that they might take out of everything that you just said, which I hope they would take a lot of it, but is that in the past, like you said, 20, 30 years ago, we made a lot of our judgments based on the action or the end result of what we saw. But now what we're interested in is the action that's taken, and what is it that actually happens before the end result? Because let's face it, that goes right to intent more often than anything else. And you know what? That's something that's always very difficult to do, but we've also made some changes in the rule book that help officials deal with that whole issue of, you know, is the action it's a penalty or not a penalty?
Yep. Okay, great. Moving on. What we'd like to do here tonight real quick is just take a few minutes. There's been a couple of rules and specific questions on the exams this year that seem to have caused some problems. And Dave and I want to take a couple of minutes to just go through some of those. And then once we've got a chance to button those up, we will get to your questions that are coming in through the system. And I see we got a pretty good dose coming in there. So thank you very much for that. Dave, you want to take this first one?
I will be happy to.
The question is, the question that appears on the exam is in blue. And this has been given people quite a bit of problems, and there's been a lot of officials that are willing to die on the sword out there over this one, feeling that that answer B is the correct answer. So you want to go ahead and kind of sort of walk them through this one?
Sure. As Matt said, the question on the test is: a goalkeeper is assessed a misconduct for breaking their stick over the goal frame after giving up a goal, and then the goalkeeper verbally abuses the referee, resulting in another misconduct. But of course, a second misconduct in the game is actually an automatic game, is in lieu of a game misconduct penalty being assessed. Who serves the penalty for the misconduct? Well, if we used, once again, the whole rule book as a reference point, the correct answer here is B, a non-penalized player on the ice at the time of the infraction.
No, the correct answer is D, Dave.
Yes,
B
I
is
know.
the one. Yep.
I'm hoping.
Oh, there you go. Never mind. Sorry to interrupt. We'll see if
That's
we can
quite
edit
a
that
right.
out.
That's quite a right, because my guess is that's probably the answer that most people would have been given. The correct answer, as Matt just said, is no one is required to serve the penalty. Why? Because the misconduct penalties does not affect the on-ice strength of the penalized team or of the goalkeeper's team. So therefore, no one needs to serve it. I hope everybody understands that. Matt, you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just so basically the casebook situation number 2 is, and again, I will fully admit that we do not have specific language in Rule 407 under goalkeeper penalties that deals with that specific situation of the goalkeeper being assessed of the game misconduct without any type of additional penalty that would cause that team to be shorthanded. But if we go back to Rule 404 misconduct penalties, casebook situation number 2, we treat a goalkeeper like a player, okay, in this particular instance. And since the on-ice strength is not affected by any of the assessed penalties, again, keep it in mind, the spirit and the intent of the rules is based on, especially a youth hockey, is based on participation. We don't want a youth hockey player to have to sit for 10 minutes when there's no reason for that person as a substitute. That particular player didn't even get the penalty. So as a substitute in that particular case, we don't want that player to serve for 10 minutes and not be able to participate. It's the same thing when the goalkeeper is the one that's assessed that penalty. So even though there's no specific language in 407, it does revert back to 404. Since there is no on-ice strength affected as a result of the penalties that were assessed, there is no need for that team to place an additional player on the penalty bench to serve the coincidental penalty, or in this case, the original misconduct penalty. Next one, and this was part of the rule change process in regards to the face-off location after a penalty is assessed. And essentially, where people are getting confused a little bit is Team A is on a 5-on-4 power play. And then Team A, while they're on that power play, is assessed a minor penalty. And we have officials who are reading the language in 409A and not necessarily understanding the spirit and the intent of that particular rule. And they're saying that, well, since a Team A is not immediately going to be shorthanded as a result of the penalty, it's going to be 4-on-4. Therefore, the face-off should be a last play face-off. Whereas the spirit and the intent of the rule is clearly designed to have that face-off, since Team A is taking a minor penalty that will ultimately at some point cause them to be shorthanded, because when Team B's penalty expires, okay, Team A is going to be shorthanded, that penalty or that ensuing face-off will take place in their defending zone. And again, that's created a little bit of confusion because of that language. I think we'll maybe try to clean that up a little bit when we go through the next rule change process. But I want to make that clear. Once again, the spirit of the intent of the rule or that language was never to basically reward a team for taking a penalty while they're on the power play by not having to have that face-off take place in their defending zone.
And I think that's the important part, Matt, is that the spirit and intent of the rule, if you ever find yourself in a situation where you're not sure, is that we don't want to reward a team that has just committed a standalone penalty infraction.
Okay, very good. And the next one under 409, Team A is on a 5-on-4 power play again, and they're in the process of being assessed a minor penalty. During the delay, Team B scores. Okay, and they're basically, we have some people that are misapplying the rule or misinterpreting the rule, and they saying, well, since Team B is shorthanded and they score, then no penalty, or the penalty terminates, or it doesn't terminate, or whatever. And there's a lot of confusion there in terms of which team is on the power play and who gets the benefits from that. But the bottom line is just because Team A was on the power play and they had another minor penalty, okay, even though Team B, the shorthanded team, scores, a minor penalty is still going to terminate in that particular situation, just as if it was 5-on-5 or 4-on-4. So in this particular case, the delayed penalty to Team A does terminate as a result of that goal, and they will continue on a 5-on-4 power play when play continues. Okay, it does not go to 4-on-4 just because Team B scored when they were shorthanded. And again, that goes back to the spirit of the intent of that particular rule, is that whether they're 5-on-5 or whether they're 4-on-5, that first minor penalty that's supposed to be imposed will be imposed and recorded, but it will be deemed terminated as a result of the goal. Okay, 620 head contact, Dave.
Pardon me. Casebook, let's talk about the head contact with regards to casebook situation number 4 under Rule 620. What degree of force is needed for a match penalty to be assessed for head contact? There's some key terminology here. Any check using excessive force for the purpose, and here's the key, for the purpose of intimidating or punishing the opponent that makes direct contact with the head area of the opponent must be assessed as a match penalty. Remember, and again, here's some qualifiers. The onus is on the player delivering the check not to contact the head area of the opponent. When done with excessive force in a manner that recklessly, and here's another term that we inserted this year, recklessly endangers an opponent, the player must be held accountable for this dangerous action. Now, we can just have a long discussion perhaps on what is or what constitutes excessive force, but anything that is directed, any contact directed directly to the head, where you feel that it puts the opponent and recklessly endangers the opponent, that's the line in your mind that you have to draw. Remember, your responsibility again as an official is to manage a game in a fair and safe manner, and that's where this rule is all about safety more than anything else.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. And I think the key to this is the question that's actually on the exam uses the terminology intentionally targets the head. Okay. And in that particular case, when we're looking at any type of deliberate or intentional target of the head, that's going to be deemed to be deemed to be reckless endangerment. And whereas a lot of officials are choosing the major plus the game misconduct for there, because of the terminology of the intentional and or deliberate contact to the head, that should automatically resort back to the match penalty.
And here again, we go back to the action, not the end result of the infraction.
Okay. Again, we still seem to have some confusion as it relates to rubbing, grabbing, or holding the face mask of an opponent. And again, the spirit of the intent really is we have in situation 2 in the casebook, we address the face wash, which is the rubbing portion. And there's a big difference between what we deem to be the rub, okay, versus the grab versus the hold. And they all fit under the major plus the game misconduct or the match penalty, okay? But simply rubbing and doing the little face wash type thing doesn't have the same degree of dangerous aspect to it as grabbing and or holding and twisting and those types of things. And again, we just want to make sure that everyone is clear between those particular differences. And the rubbing portion is designed to cover that face wash. We all know that hockey players' equipment stinks. We all know that if you put an open palm glove in front of an open face mask, you're probably going to eventually suffocate the opponent because of that particular smell. But it does not carry that same degree of dangerousness it's a disrespectful thing. It certainly warrants the major plus the game. But in order to get to that threshold that calls for that match penalty, you're probably going to be looking at either grabbing and or holding the face mask in that particular situation. And one more, Dave, in regards to the difference between a kick and a push off.
Yep. We sometimes, and listen, no one's going to criticize you if you're not sure of exactly where the line is here, but in an effort to try to get a little more understanding here, the difference between a major plus a game versus a match penalty, a push off is 2 players collide or fall on the ice, and one tries to get up and through the natural motion somehow just happens to brush against the opponent. Now, obviously, if it's viewed by the official as intentional, then we go to the next level, stepping on with the skate blade, however, which is a match penalty. However, if it's just a push off, in other words, players get wound up on the ice and they're just trying to get away from each other, that's simply a major and a game misconduct situation. And why do we start with a major? Because that skate blade is very dangerous. And I mean, we don't want that thing being irresponsibly either pushed or intentionally you know, trying to, you know, in some way, shape, or form, potentially injure an opponent. Now, if there's also a kicking motion, now, you know, some people may interpret the push off as a kicking motion. I think we have to rely on your judgment as an individual official to see that situation and decide whether or not it's a push off or whether it's a kick. Although in a lot of situations, I think we can make the differentiation between a push and a kick, because a kick certainly has a lot more intent behind it, and that, of course, will result in a match penalty.
Yeah. And the actual question on the exam specifically says that two players collide, they fall down, and getting up, one of the players intentionally steps on their opponent. And people go to the rule and they say, well, that's you know, they look at the case book or they look at the rule and they're indicating that that's a push off. No, when you're intentionally stepping on the opponent with a skate blade, with basically a sharp knife, and the force of your weight behind there, that falls under the kicking action, and that definitely warrants the match penalty.
And,
and
just, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Matt, but just, I mean, people have to, or officials have to understand, you know, the responsibility in that situation where, you know, two players collide and one gets up and steps on another opponent, steps on the opponent on the ice. It's that player's responsibility to know where that opponent's limbs are. And we can't dismiss the fact that whether he meant to do it or not, the fact is the action occurred, and it's their responsibility to know where that opponent is and where they're, you know, spread out over the ice. So, you know, again, all too often we maybe are giving a little bit too much of a benefit of the doubt to the offender and not keeping in mind the player who's being either stepped on or kicked or pushed off of.
Okay, thank you. Dave, real quick here, I'm going to go back to our little goalkeeper penalty situation, because that has generated a couple of questions here in the chat. And one of the questions is, you know, why is it that a minor penalty for unsportsmanlike when the goalkeeper originally banged his stick or broke his stick over the crossbar? Basically, if we look at Rule 601A, which calls for the minor penalty for unsportsmanlike, there are 4 situations that fall under that potential minor penalty. Okay, it's inciting an opponent, it's disputing the referee, it's shooting the puck after the whistle, and those types of things. Under 601C, which is the misconduct, it specifically says that any player or goalkeeper who deliberately takes their stick or another object to bang the glass, the boards, or the goal frame is assessed a misconduct penalty. It's not a minor penalty. So that's why they got the original misconduct versus a minor in the first place, because by rule, that is the spirit and the intent of the rules. Okay, so when that player when he then continued to verbally abuse the official, okay, that is a continuation of that misconduct, okay? And that also carries into a secondary or second misconduct, which by rule carries into a game misconduct in lieu of that second misconduct. So in that particular case, the goalkeeper is removed from the game. He's assessed a game misconduct. He's removed from the game. He will have a 1-game additional suspension for that. But at that particular point, there is no time penalty that goes on that clock that would cause that team to be shorthanded. So in that particular instance, there is no reason to put the additional player in the box. Okay, so that covers that one.
Well, while you're queuing up the next one, let me just add to what you just said, because it goes back to what we talked about a little earlier, is that officials have got to take the rule book in its entirety when they're looking at certain situations. And this is a perfect example of it, because the game, as you described it just a minute or so ago, the section that deals with the misconduct versus the minor penalty, they're in 2 different places, but they apply to the same situation. And it's important that officials know that that is an option here, or that is the option here. And all too often, again, officials will read the rule book rule by rule, paragraph by paragraph, and not realize that a lot of rules, let's say rules 601, also have references to rules that follow it later on in the 600 section. So that's why rule knowledge is so, so important, and spirit and intent is equally important.
Okay, thank you. And that actually leads to one of our next questions here is what's the call when a penalized player on the way to the bench hits the boards with their stick in protest of the call? Okay, that falls under 601D, okay, because it specifically mentions in 601D under the game misconduct penalty, okay, is that that warrants a game misconduct. So when a player bangs their stick against the boards out of frustration, okay, or a goalkeeper bangs their stick over the crossbar because they just gave up a goal, that's out of frustration. That falls under 601C, okay, and that becomes a misconduct penalty. However, when they do that, either one of those actions specifically in protest of an official's decision, it now triggers 601D, which automatically goes to the game misconduct penalty.
And that's so important. I mean, that's again knowing the differences in the different sections of the rule. I mean, I'm willing to wager a lot of officials in that situation, a certain percentage of them would simply call another bench minor because they think of that rule about disputing a call of the referee or a misconduct, which both answers are incorrect because of what you just said.
Okay, next question, Dave, for you. Can you please explain the penalties regarding the goalkeeper? Veteran ref for 15 plus years, newer officials and many coaches do not seem to understand how goalies are special. Well, we can argue that one at a later time. That's another Zoomcast in itself. But with that being said, accidental contact or contact with the goalkeeper in that blue paint, in that crease area, is a penalty. So could you elaborate a little bit in regards to what's allowable and what's not allowable as it relates to contact with the goalkeeper?
Well, I think first of all, I think we have to all agree that the goalkeeper plays a unique position in the game. Not only because he has all these hard rubber discs shot at him, but I mean, let's face it, he has a whole lot of different equipment on him also. So the game has always treated the goalkeeper a bit differently as a regular skater. And I don't know if anyone noticed it, but there was certain amount of verbiage change this year when we talked about players being skaters versus the goalkeeper. The goalkeeper is a skater, but they're not necessarily a player here. The idea being is that the goalkeeper has very distinct responsibilities, and he obviously needs to have a certain amount of what's the word I'm looking for? I don't want to say protection, but needs to have some certain privileges that perhaps the other players don't have. And those privileges exist not only within his goal crease, but also within his privileged area. As long as he's playing his position, he's allowed to do things that that the skaters are not allowed to do. Example being, he can freeze the puck in the crease or in the privileged area if there's an attacking player pressing him. I mean, these are things that I think we have to understand. The spirit and intent is to allow the goalkeeper the privileges that will give him the ability to play the game or play his position within the game. And so that's why we don't allow skaters to be in the goal crease when the puck is not there. He needs to have the ability to move around to be able to protect his area, his position within the goal crease. So again, that's the reason why we give the goalkeeper certain privileges that the skaters in the game don't have. And if you want to add something, go right ahead, man.
No, I think that's a pretty good explanation. And again, it really boils down to the goalkeeper does have some rights and some added benefits, not only because of what their role is or what the position it is that they play, but also because of the equipment And one may think that that's added protection, but in some cases it also limits some mobility and some of the things that they can do. So the bottom line is we're giving them that space to be able to do their job. But at the same time, we have to make sure that we're not allowing them to take liberties as it relates to freezing the puck unnecessarily, as it relates to initiating contact outside of the crease, and those types of things as well.
I'm glad you just mentioned that, Matt, because I was just about to say, we also restrict some things that the goaltender can do because he is the goaltender.
Yep, no, for sure. For sure. Okay, next question. What's the call when a coach gives the official verbal abuse at the end of a game? Dave?
Oh, well, listen, obviously the whole abuse issue is rampant, and unfortunately it continues to grow, and it's certainly something that we've all been focused on. I've been really focused on since, as you mentioned, I'm part of the task force committee, task force group, I should say, examining the whole officiating issues and as they relate to abuse and so on and retention. If a coach, is giving you the business after the game, obviously it would seem to be no point in giving him a bench minor, because what's that going to do? So what you need to do is look at the situation and figure out what's the best way that you can what's the word I'm looking for? Manage that situation. In some cases, it may be that you assess a game misconduct, depending on the level of abuse. It may also, which would require you then to file a game report on the National Game Reporting System so that potential follow-up disciplinary action can be taken. The one thing that I know we all encourage our officials to do is that when you have situations of abuse, is that you take some kind of action so that the local disciplinary bodies at least are made aware of it, and they may even have a reason to act on it, to try and change that behavior in the future.
Yeah, and I think the key here is again, the spirit of the intent, and Dave alluded to, is we still need to follow the progression. Okay, but I think in depending upon the circumstances after the game and the situation, is we can certainly have a much faster trigger as it relates to going from that bench minor to that game misconduct. And what I say by that is let's say you're on the ice and you think the coach is coming over to shake your hand. Okay, and when he starts walking over, he starts abusing you right away. Okay, and that warrants the bench minor penalty. At that particular juncture, you can mention to him, okay, coach, that's enough. That's a bench minor. Okay, and then skate away. Skate away. You got 200 by 85 feet and you're on skates. That coach, if he wants to chase you at that point, then it becomes obvious to everyone when you're assessing that game misconduct penalty. Okay, or if you've made it clear that you've assessed a minor penalty, the bench minor, and he still continues, then it progresses and it escalates to the game misconduct under continuing the actions that warranted an original bench minor in the first place. If it happens in the hallway, okay, once again, keep on walking away. You can alert him to the fact that he's been given a bench minor, and if he continues on, again, it's probably going to be a much quicker trigger than it would be when it would in a normal type game situation. But go to the game misconduct, file the proper paperwork, make sure that the score sheet is accurate in regards to assessing the bench minor penalty plus the game misconduct. Next question, Dave. I'll let you take it. A younger official asked me why behind the making sure that we call the most specific penalty possible. For example, a charge versus an interference. My answer was penalty options available, meaning you've got more options when you have more specific typically. And the other reason was establishing credibility with players and coaches. Was I correct in that case, or did I miss anything?
No, I think you were right on. I mean, labeling of penalties is important in the sense that, well, first of all, depending on what the penalties are, we may be dealing with, supplemental discipline or things like that. So, I mean, it's really important that, we understand the importance of properly labeling penalties. Listen, if we're honest with each other, everything that happens on the ice that is a penalty could be theoretically called interference. But that's the reason we have all these other categories of penalties, holding, tripping, slashing, and so on. So the idea is that, as you just said, Matt, be as specific as you can. If it's a restraining foul, call it some form of restraining foul. If it's an aggressive foul, call it an aggressive foul, and make sure that the penalties are correctly reported again, because we also, as I just said, we now have, a national game reporting system, and we have, the supplemental 411 rule, and players and teams and coaches now are accountable for their actions on individual actions in games, and as they accumulate over time.
Okay, which actually leads us to the next question. And again, how do we know if a player gets a game misconduct that they are actually going to get suspended a game or more? Is there a way to follow up on this? I'll take this, and ultimately, once we've enforced the rule on the ice as an official, and we've submitted the proper paperwork, meaning the online game reporting system, it's not our responsibility to track that anymore. That now falls on the affiliate, and that falls on the proper disciplinary authority. So the bottom line is the affiliates are the ones, and the local leagues and the governing bodies and the clubs are the ones that are expected to follow up on that and to ensure that happens. I do know for a fact that there are several affiliates that if they were to find out that a player and or a coach did not serve the appropriate suspension, that coach is going to be suspended for a minimum of 1 year. So they will come down on them very, very hard when they know that they have intentionally played a player that they knew that was supposed to be under suspension. So bottom line is it's up to the clubs, it's up to the leagues to do that. And we've officially done our job once we have assessed the appropriate penalty and filled out the proper game report. Dave, if a coincidental penalty is assessed, would the face-off be at the place where the puck was last played?
Well, we of course now with the new rule book have our 9-dot rule, and so no, it wouldn't be last play. It would be nearest 9-dot location to the stoppage of play.
Okay. What separates reckless endangerment from attempt to injure? I'm not exactly sure that there is any real separation from there, other than the fact that in our last rule change process, we wanted to take out any reference to injury. Officials are not doctors, they're not physicians, they are not trained to be able to identify whether a player was injured or not. So we took out any language as it related to major penalties and game misconducts as a result of an injury, and replaced that with recklessly endangers or reckless endangerment. Same thing holds true for the match penalty for a deliberate attempt to injure or deliberate injury to an opponent. Once again, we felt that we wanted officials to be able to judge the action that took place and then assess the appropriate penalty versus trying to determine whether a player or an opponent was injured or not as a result of that particular action. We want the action judged. So that's where that language changed. And that's where we implemented the reckless endangerment or recklessly endangers versus attempt to injure or injury of an opponent. Okay, a couple more real quick. I know we're running up against the time here. Real quickly, question on the 409B, the 5 versus 4. I think the key to this, you understand, it was a team that was on the power play, okay, that had the delayed penalty. So when the team that was shorthanded scored, there were not 2 penalties to terminate at that point. There was no choice as to which penalty gets terminated. The only one that could have been terminated was the delayed penalty that was going to be called on Team A. So hopefully that clears that up for you. Any talk on stick on puck for body check at the U14 would be appreciated. That would obviously take considerable more time than what we probably have tonight. But I would say, Jason, if you want to reach out to me offline, whether it be email or give me a call, I'm in the office tomorrow, or drop me an email at mattl@usahockey.org. I'd be more than happy to generate a little bit more discussion with you on and that, and certainly try to clear up any questions that you may have. And we have a video clip here that we're not going to get into tonight, but again, I think if Christopher, if you want to go ahead and send that to either Dave or myself offline, we'll be more than happy to give you an opinion in terms of where that might fit into the grand scheme of things. And clock not started in the third period. Approximately 3 minutes in the period, players yelled this. So whistled and stopped play to address it. Other refs said it should have allowed play to continue without the clock. Was he right? Dave, you want to talk about the clock procedure real quick?
Well, obviously, if I'm sure everybody who's listening to this understands what awareness is, and certainly this falls under the category of awareness. I would hope that it wouldn't take 3 minutes for the officials to realize that the clock is not running. However, they have to do their best to figure out exactly, what the time factor is here. And just deal with it as best as they can. In youth hockey, we don't have any backup systems, and therefore we have no way of really knowing how much time actually didn't elapse off the clock. So again, we rely on the good judgment, the common sense of our officials to be able to deal with the fact that, well, we believe this amount of time expired off the clock, reset the clock, and move the game on.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to share my screen one last time to do my obligatory upcoming schedule. If I don't do this, BJ gets on me pretty hard the next day. So basically, again, tonight we covered the playing rules Q&A. And again, I want to emphasize, and I know I can speak for myself. I'm pretty sure I can speak for Dave on this too. We have an open door policy as it relates to any types of rules questions. So if you have something that we didn't cover tonight, or if you have a video clip that you want us to take a look at and get an opinion on or whatever, feel free to forward that to me and or Dave or whatever, and give us a little bit of patience in terms of giving us a day or two to get back to you. But we will definitely try to get back to you and answer any of those types of questions that you may have. And again, specifically the ones that came up tonight that we didn't get a chance to get to, feel free to reach out to me. Coming up on 2 weeks right before Christmas, BJ's ever popular You Make the Call session will take place. We'll take a little break for Christmas and New Year's, and coming back with officiating fundamentals and a program update right after our midwinter meeting in Orlando that Tuesday, January 17th. So I think we're going to have some very exciting stuff to share with you at that particular time. Again, don't forget to follow us on usahockey.com. You can go back and watch any one of the previous 62 episodes and this one on demand through the YouTube, USA Hockey YouTube channel, through the Zoomcast link, and follow us on Twitter and Instagram and all those other little social media outlets that help us share some information. I want to thank Dave for joining me tonight and being a part of this, and certainly want to thank the participants who tuned in. Hopefully we gave you some information that may be new or answered a couple of questions for you. And like I said, if there's still some things out there that you're not really sure about, feel free to reach out to us, but very much appreciate your participation. And for those regulars that have been on all 63 issue or Zoomcast so far, thank you very much. We want to wish everyone a very happy holiday season here. and hopefully an extremely successful season. Thanks for your continued dedication to USA Hockey. And Dave, any final words real quick?
I completely agree. If anyone has any follow-up rules questions, please reach out to Matt or myself. We're always interested in making sure that people have every opportunity to have their questions answered with about the rules. And I hope everyone has a happy and safe holiday season coming up.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Have a wonderful holiday, and let's make sure to continue to make the 2022-23 USA Hockey season our best one yet. Thanks, and have a great night.